everybody. Welcome to week 10 of the college football season. My name is Mike Browning. I'm the host of the College Football Road Trip at cfbroadtrip.com. I'm coming to you this week from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm not here for a game this week. I'm actually on a business trip. With that said, I am still going to make picks and hopefully do a lot better than last week where I went 3-7, which is probably, I believe, either by far the worst I've ever done in my 4 years, or at least a tie for the worst. So I can't really sink much lower, so let's hope that this week I can improve on that. Over the next week or so, I should also be working on my blog entry for the first part of my Virginia trip and the BYU Liberty game in Lynchburg, so be on the lookout for that sometime next week. Again, not a great slate of games this week, but there's obviously one game at the top of the list that's amazing. Also, I wrote down these rankings before the college football official rankings came out, so these are still based on the AP polls. Next week, I'll start using the college football rankings. With that said, let's get into this week's picks. We're going to start off with that Thursday night game out of the Sun Belt. We have Appalachian State traveling to Coastal Carolina. This has been a big game in the Sun Belt the past few years. It's one of those games that seems to always decide one of the divisions in the Sun Belt. This season, App State has come back down to earth a little bit. They're not as dominant as they have been in the past. On the flip side, you have Coastal Carolina, who has played really well this season. They've been under the radar because they did have an early season loss, but since then, they only have that one loss this season. Because of that, I think Coastal Carolina will continue to roll this week. I have Coastal Carolina winning at home over Appalachian State on Thursday night. Next, let's go to a Friday night matchup. Out of the Pac-12, we have number 24, Oregon State, traveling to Washington. This is another game that I think is a little bit under the radar. These are two teams that early in the season did very well. They've had a couple conference losses because there's still a lot of good teams above them in the Pac-12 between Oregon and USC specifically. But this is going to be a really good game. Washington is the home team in this one. They have the same record. Oregon State is ranked, but Washington's playing at home. So I'm going to give Washington the edge in this one. I have Washington winning at home over 24th ranked Oregon State in Pac-12 play on Friday night. Going to our Saturday matchups now. We're going to have a non-conference matchup first. We have James Madison traveling to Louisville out of the ACC. James Madison just a couple weeks ago made it up to number 25 in the AP poll, but then they have since lost their last two games. Louisville has started off slow, but has kind of risen over the past couple of weeks and had a couple good showings against some ACC opponents. I think the momentum is going to continue for both of these teams this week. Louisville continuing to slowly move up. James Madison coming back down to earth. Have Louisville winning at home over James Madison. Next, let's go to another non-conference matchup. This one's a pretty interesting one. We have 23rd ranked Liberty traveling to Arkansas out of the SEC. Liberty obviously has made it up into the AP rankings this week. Had the huge win over BYU a couple of weeks ago. Gave Hugh Freeze the huge contract extension this week. Everything is moving their way as we move forward. Arkansas has had a couple tough losses in the SEC, but the SEC has tough teams every single week that they're playing. I think with Arkansas being the home team in this one, Liberty coming off of the high of beating BYU, make it to the rankings for the first time, giving Hugh Freeze the contract. I think they're going to come back down to earth this week. I think Arkansas is going to pull it off. And for Arkansas winning at home over Liberty. Next, let's go to a Big 12 matchup. We have 18th ranked Oklahoma State traveling to Kansas. Oklahoma State, wow, what happened to them last week with the walloping that Kansas State gave them, shutting them out 48-0. That was just a very surprising result. On the flip side, you have Kansas, which started off the season very strong. They've come back down to earth now that we've entered into the middle of Big 12 play. The question is Oklahoma State going to bounce back this week and put Kansas back in their place? I think they will. I think Oklahoma State's going to want to bounce back and show that they still have a decent team. Kansas, after the great start of the year, as I mentioned, the last couple of weeks they have struggled. I think their struggles will continue, even though they're the home team in this one. 18th ranked Oklahoma State will win on the road at Kansas in Big 12 play. Next, let's go to another Big 12 matchup. We have Texas traveling to 13th ranked Kansas State. Kansas State obviously is on the plus side at that walloping last week, 48-0 against Oklahoma State. They are right at the top of the list of the Big 12 rankings as well. If they can win out, they would obviously replay TCU. On the other side, you have Texas, who really has kind of struggled off and on. They have one good week, and then they struggled the next week. Barely beat Iowa State a couple of weeks ago. The question is, what Texas team is going to show up? I think it's going to be a Texas team that ends up losing. They're playing on the road at Kansas State. Kansas State still has so much to play for. They want to show that they deserve to be at the top of the conference. I have 13th ranked Kansas State winning at home over Texas in Big 12 play. Next, let's go to another non-conference matchup. We have 5th-ranked Clemson traveling to Notre Dame. This should be a really interesting matchup. Last week, Notre Dame played Syracuse. I picked Syracuse in that matchup, but Notre Dame just looked amazing in that matchup. Clemson, on the other hand, is a team that at the beginning of the year struggled week in, week out. I actually picked against them a couple times. But as I mentioned before, they're looking better and better every week, and I think that's going to continue this week. They will go and win pretty convincingly at Notre Dame. I have 5th-ranked Clemson winning on the road at Notre Dame. Let's go to an ACC matchup next between two ranked teams. 20th-ranked Wake Forest against 21st-ranked NC State. Wake Forest is a team, pardon me, that has kind of come back down to earth. They had the big loss last week to Louisville, where they had 6 turnovers just in the third quarter. That's amazing. That hasn't happened in years. I think it was 15 years was the last time something like that had happened. On the flip side, NC State, they're the home team in this one. They've lost a couple games along the way as well, but they haven't gotten blown out or had an embarrassing loss like Wake Forest had last week. Because of that, I think NC State will have the momentum. Wake Forest will continue to fall back down to earth a little bit. 21st-ranked NC State winning at home over 20th-ranked Wake Forest in ACC play. Next, let's go to an SEC matchup. 6th-ranked Alabama traveling to 15th-ranked LSU. LSU is the team that has been looking really good over the past few weeks. They obviously had those couple losses at the beginning of the season. Everybody counted them out, including myself. But over the past few weeks, they started to look better. They had the big win over Ole Miss. This week, Alabama is coming into town. Alabama is trying to continue to stay at the top of the conversation in the college football playoff, being 6th ranked in that first ranking. But in order to have any chance of making the playoffs, they're going to have to win out, obviously. And that includes a win this week, which I believe they will get. As 6th ranked Alabama winning on the road, that 15th ranked LSU in SEC play. And so now let's go to the huge matchup of the week. SEC number 2 Tennessee traveling to number 1 Georgia. Again, this was the AP rankings. We know in the college football rankings, Tennessee's 1 and Georgia's 3, but this is still a huge matchup. This will ultimately decide the SEC East. The winner will very likely make it onto the championship game. The question is, what will happen to the loser if the loser wins out? There's a lot of scenarios that come into play. The question is, what happens this week? Tennessee's offense has looked unstoppable week in and week out. They dominated Kentucky last week. They obviously have the win over Alabama. Georgia, on the other side, struggled a little bit throughout the season. Last week, they just dominated Florida, though. They're starting to look better along the way. This is one of those scenarios where Georgia is the home team, so I'm going to give them the edge. If it was at Tennessee, I think I would pick Tennessee. But since Georgia's the home team, I'm picking them in this one. Number 1, Georgia over number 2, Tennessee. Again, those are AP rankings, but Georgia will win at home in SEC play. So those are this week's games. I'm really excited for that huge matchup between Tennessee and Georgia. So go out of your way, try to pick that one up. But don't forget about the other games this week. I'll be on the road again in a couple of weeks to Southern Miss. I'll continue to work on my blog entries over the next couple of weeks. So a lot of action on my side over the next month. Be on the lookout for that. And we will talk to all of you again next week.